Hello everyone, Christina Werner here. Welcome to another video for AssignmentSaysStamp.com. Today I'm using the brand new Home Sweet Home stamp set that comes in the July 2020 card kit. I'm going to be making 3 different cards today. You saw a glimpse of them at the beginning of the video. And I'm starting out with some ink blending on this soft navy cardstock. I've cut it to be the size of my finished card, so 5.5 wide by 4.25 tall, and I put a little bit of masking tape right at the bottom. This is actually masking paper that I've trimmed down to be a smaller strip. I put it at the very bottom of my cardstock, and then I'm going to be blending some Picked Raspberry Distress Oxide ink up from the bottom. I want the pink shade to come up maybe 3/4 of the way to the top of this cardstock. By the way, the white surface I'm using today is a mini media mat from Waffle Flower. I think it's actually called their mini water media mat. It's great for blending. It cleans up really, really well. I'm now using black soot oxide ink, and I'm going to blend this from the very top. I want to intensify the blue shade, and then I sort of lost the blue of the cardstock, so I brought in some chipped sapphire right through the center just to bring a little bit of that blue back into the blend. This is eventually going to look like a nighttime sky, so that's why I want that really dark black near the top. After I have all my blending done, I'm going to peel up that piece of masking paper, and you kind of can see I have a horizon line now. Smoothed out that top corner because the blending was a little wonky, and then I'm going to set this aside and let it dry while I work on my other 2 cards. I now have some cardstock from Hero Arts, and these are all cut to 4.25 wide. I'm going to first start by stamping the city scene from the stamp set near the bottom of this pink cardstock. I'm then going to remove the pink cardstock from my Misty stamp tool, and I'm going to kind of make a little tick mark on the orange cardstock about midway where that clock is on that tower. That's about the distance that I want. So I'm making a little tick mark there. I lined up my city scene once again with the bottom line of the city scene right where that tick mark was and stamped it. The black ink I'm using today is a VersaFine Onyx Black ink, by the way. For this blue aqua cardstock, I'm doing the same thing, marking my cardstock right where that clock lines up, and then I stamp my city scene a 3rd time. After I have all 3 of my horizon line or city scenes stamped, I'm then going to take my scissors and just cut along the top edge of each one of these. My plan is to have them stacked and sort of looking like steps coming down, and I want each one of these to have that cut edge that emphasizes the skyline. So I'm just trimming all of these down. Once I have that first blue one done, I can put it right over top of my dark blue cardstock just to kind of get an idea of what it's going to look like in the end. I cut out the orange, and then the last one was this nice pink rose shade. All of the cardstocks I used today will be listed down in the video description and also in the supply section, so make sure you check those out if you want these specific cardstock colors. So after I had those cut out, I just placed that dark blue cardstock in my Misty. I put the aqua blue stamped piece below just so I could position my greeting just right. And then I'm going to be stamping and heat embossing this. Because I'm embossing, I'm using a powder tool. It's an anti-static powder tool just to eliminate any static cling. And then I stamped my greeting in Versamark ink. Versamark ink is very sticky, so it's going to be perfect for heat embossing. So just stamp that down really quickly. And then I applied some white embossing powder. This is Alabaster embossing powder from Brutus Monroe. I tapped off the excess and then hit that with my heat tool until the greeting was smooth and melted. So there's just a couple little things I need to do to finish up this card. I'm going to stamp the large outline heart, or larger, I should say. It's still pretty small, from the stamp set. I'm stamping that in some more VersaFine Onyx Black ink. I'm going to set that aside for just a minute while I adhere this card together, starting with that bottom layer directly onto my card base, which I've made out of some Neenah Environmental Desert Storm cardstock. I then put foam adhesive on the back of each one of my city lines, city skylines, making sure I have adhesive behind each one of these that are kind of popping up, and then adhere them down onto the card. So this is going to be a pretty dimensional card, considering that very top layer has 3 layers of adhesive underneath it. So it's going to be pretty thick. So after I had that done, I then trimmed out the little outline heart just using my scissors. And I put some foam adhesive behind the heart and placed that near the top, just nestled in right next to that city skyline. So that's my first card all finished. You can see all the dimension on that with all 3 of those skylines. I'm now going to move on to my next card, and I'm going to be doing some ink blending in sort of a sunray pattern using some Distress Oxide inks. This first color I'm using is Ripe Persimmon, and then I moved to Picked Raspberry, and I'm going to have this kind of second ray overlap the Ripe Persimmon just a little bit, so I get a little bit of a transition color in between the two. This raised pattern with lots of colors is actually inspired by some pattern paper from Vicki Boutin. I'll try to link the pattern paper pack below, but there's this really pretty pattern with colorful rays coming in. And actually on the actual pattern paper, there's different patterns within each one of these sections, but I'm just going to have ink blending. I then used peacock feathers, and now I'm using antique linen. And then I'll end with some Twisted Citron. And I just overlapped some of these rays just so I could get a little bit of interest and multiple colors, because the colors from the overlap, they create new colors. So after I had all of my rays, then I was able to remove the masking paper, and I'm actually going to work on the cityscape that goes on this card. I'm stamping the city skyline plus the clouds and the sun on some white cardstock. This is Neenah Solar White cardstock. This is just the 80-pound version, so it's a little bit easier to cut out. So I cut out my skyline here, and I also cut out both clouds and the sun. And I'm going to be adhering these directly over top of my ink blended piece. So I'm putting some foam adhesive on the back of each one of these, including both clouds and the sun. And then I adhered them directly onto my ink blended piece. So I'm going to be stamping my greeting at the top of this piece here. So I've placed it inside my MISTI stamp positioning tool, and I'm going to just stamp this greeting in VersaFine Onyx Black ink. I thought it would look really nice, that nice stark black. It would play well with the black lines of my city scene. So this card is basically done. All I have to do is adhere it to a card front. And I decided to use some more of that craft colored cardstock. So this is that Neenah Environmental Desert Storm cardstock. So I just adhered that down using some Tombow Extreme adhesive, and my second card is complete. So now I'm back to my ink blended piece from the very beginning, and I'm going to be doing some heat embossing over the top of this oxide blending. So I'm going to do some test strokes to make sure that the embossing powder is not going to stick. And it wasn't quite completely dry. I'm glad I checked. So I brushed that off with just a dry paintbrush, added some powder tool for my anti-static powder, and then tested my panel again. And that was enough to make sure that the powder slides right off. So then I stamped my scene in Versamark ink. Like I mentioned right before, I'm going to be heat embossing on top of this background. So I've lined up the bottom of my city skyline right along that edge, and then I sprinkled on some white embossing powder. Once again, this is Alabaster embossing powder from Burtis Monroe. I heat set that until it was smooth and melted, and then I stamped the moon and some stars and my greeting. I used the MISTI for this initial stamping, but then I will move to an acrylic block, and that's because I want to just have a scattering of stars filling up the remainder of the card front, and I knew it would just be a little bit faster just to go ahead and stamp those by hand instead of using a MISTI. So after I had heat embossed the greeting and the stars and the moon, I then just used an acrylic block with the star stamps to add additional stars. I sprinkled some embossing powder on all of those stars as well, and then heat set that with my heat tool. So I really love this card. I love how it turned out. It's pretty simple. In fact, it is a 1-layer card. There's no dimension on this card, so it's going to be really, really great to mail. I won't need any additional postage. I can just stick it right in an envelope and out to my recipient. put some Tombow Extreme Adhesive on the back. And then I used a white card base for this. This white card base is some Neenah Classic Crest Solar White 110-pound cardstock. So those are the 3 cards that I made using the stamp set from the July 2020 card kit. I hope you guys enjoyed. All 3 of these cards don't require any coloring, just the stamped image itself. I think that's really fun. So thanks so much for watching today. You can get the card kit over at simonsthestamp.com. I'll see you guys very soon in another video.